Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. The time is 9:02 a.m. and you are listening to and watching Good Morning, Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast. We have a special interview and show for you guys this morning. My guest today is the current Kane County State's Attorney, Jamie Mosser, here to talk to us about many things. How are you?
I'm good, Curtis. How are you?
All right, not too bad. So we are in the last hours and today of
Thank
of
goodness.
voting. Yeah, absolutely. Before we start off, how do things feel?
I think things feel great.
Okay.
Over the last 4 years, I've worked really hard to make sure that we're doing everything that's best for Kane County. So I've been out in the community, not just in my office in a courthouse.
Right.
And then over the last year plus, we have been campaigning like nobody's business, door knocking everywhere. Just since signatures, we've done over 4,500 doors that we've knocked on, plus events, plus mailers, plus getting signs out, going to community events. I feel very positive that people know who I am, what I've done, and that I'm the best candidate to be reelected.
When you knock on those doors, what's the most persistent thing that you hear? What do you hear repeatedly when you knock on that door? That person comes out. What are they telling you?
Most of the time, it's somebody surprised that it's the actual state's attorney who's at their door, or the circuit clerk, or Judge Parga, who I've been knocking with.
Okay.
When people are really engaged and they're talking about it, they just want to know what we're doing.
Okay.
In terms of anyone knowing what a state's attorney does, they know that I work with law enforcement. They know, obviously, that we work with people who commit crimes. And so it's a good discussion about that fair balance between making sure we hold people accountable but get them to services. Mm-hmm. And then those are the people who keep our community unsafe, and those are the people who we dedicate our prosecution to make sure that they go to prison where they belong.
So that's what's been new in the last 10 years or so of law enforcement, that focus on services,
Yes.
and addressing needs while also keeping the folks who need to go to prison in prison.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
we've had a big shift because when I was first a prosecutor, and you and I have talked about this before, the whole concept was jail, prison. Because the idea was if you go to jail or prison, then you know not to do it again. That almost like you're trying to parent somebody out of something.
Right.
But we know that doesn't work because we've seen mass incarceration and we've seen how many people come out of prison and they just continue down the criminal path because they don't have the resources.
Right.
Putting somebody in jail doesn't make them not have a mental health issue or substance use, and it certainly doesn't provide them access to resources. And so over the last 10 years, our legislature and laws have shifted, our law enforcement has shifted, prosecution has shifted to realize that the people who make us unsafe, we're going to put those people in prison. But for everybody else, we're going to help them get treatment and resources to get them out of the system.
What's the current state of Kane County in regards to safety? Now, of course, there's the Kane County State's Attorney's website that people can go to and check out for other information. We'll put the link to that in the chat. But what should folks in Kane County be celebrating?
So we should be celebrating the programs that we have, not only in my office, but in law enforcement, because we all work really well together to do more community policing and deflection rather than just arrest, put in the system, go through many months of going to court to eventually get to the resources. And so I've worked very closely with all of our police departments in Kane County. Something that people may not understand is for police officers have discretion. And when they see somebody committing a crime because of untreated mental health, substance use, or lack of resources, they don't have to arrest them. And in many occasions, police officers don't do that. They understand what the problem is and they say, please try to get help, and they go on their way.
Right.
But the problem is when you don't give somebody help, that's an issue. Here in Aurora, they have their I always forget the acronym for here because they're everywhere differently. So a critical care services unit where they help to respond to try to get people help without putting them through the criminal justice system. Well, now they have partners within my office, which is our pre-arrest diversion, collaborative diversion, as you know, where our grant-funded case managers are there to then help provide the resources to the individuals themselves. And that's something that the Kane County citizens should be very proud of because we're really proactive in terms of partnering with law enforcement to get these individuals resources to prevent them from having to be arrested or go through our system or even having somebody call the police on them again.
Right, right. So now Kane County encompasses a large area. So again, each, the Elgin experience different from the Aurora experience, things like that. working with those different police departments and their teams, what is that like for the, on the outside, looking in? You're building cases. That's what you do in conjunction with all those
Yes.
agencies.
And so the thing is, you have to have a good working relationship with every police department.
Okay.
Because every police department is going to have different needs. Elgin and Aurora are going to have different needs from each other. St. Charles and Geneva are going to have different needs. And so it's that open line of communication. I talk to our chiefs at least monthly. I go to our chiefs' meetings to see what's going on. I statistically look at where we have crime trends that are coming in different cities. And so when you look at that, you have to shift resources to help out with different individuals. We've talked about this before, that one of the things that I found out when I took office in 2020 was that we were not investigating and prosecuting child exploitation cases. So that's child pornography. A person is possessing it, disseminating it. And we weren't doing that because while Aurora and Elgin had investigators who could spend the time tracking this information down, the Tri-Cities area, the smaller areas, did not have that. And so what I did is I petitioned our county board to hire investigators as well as a forensic analyst and a prosecutor. And now we have been investigating those cases. And so we have gotten CEOs, CFOs, police officers, firefighters, people who just went under the radar, who are possessing and disseminating child pornography, who statistically are more likely to touch a child in their life.
Now, you guys just had a couple of recent arrests and charges made just last week.
Yes.
Serious.
And one of those was a person who is engaging in child sexploitation, which means you get a kid to give you a little bit, like something, some maybe partially nude photo, and then basically are exploiting them to give more, or else I will send this to your family, I will send this to school, and doing that to multiple children throughout Kane County. I'm very proud of the work that the Child Exploitation Unit has done in conjunction with the sheriff, because this is something that he and I have jointly done together to make sure that our community is safe.
All right. The time is 9:09 a.m. You're listening to and watching Good Morning Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast. Our guest today is the current Kane County State's Attorney, Jamie Mosser. So we recently interviewed Professor Andrew Sosnowski, who's your current challenger for
Correct.
Kane County State's Attorney. He mentioned something about a moratorium, and this is going to take us into, I got questions about the Safety Act as a whole. Detail the moratorium. What was he talking about?
So what he was basically saying is it's a legal term. Moratorium means to put a stop on something.
Sure.
If you go way back in time with Governor Quinn actually put a moratorium on the death penalty because he had done a significant amount of research that was put in about whether or not the death penalty was effective or if it was being applied correctly. So that's what it is. A governor can come in and can stop a law by putting in a moratorium. In this particular case, if anyone has followed what has been happening with the Safety Act over the last 4 years from when it was passed in 2021, there's no possibility that Governor Pritzker will ever put in a moratorium.
Right.
To start off with, when this was passed in the early morning hours in January of 2021, 100 of the 102 state's attorneys throughout all of Illinois all objected to the law.
I remember that.
Yes, and not because of the concept or the idea behind it, but because of the writing. There was going to have a lot of bad unintended consequences.
Sure.
As a result of that objection, and because of few of us, mostly me, were very vocal in our objection, we were allowed to be a part of a negotiation team to fix the Safety Act. And over the last 3 years, I've spent hours with State's Attorney Bob Berlin, who's in DuPage County. I don't know if that's the actual right direction, but go with me on this one. And then the Sheriff's Association and the Chiefs Association, where we created 3 different trailer bills that became law that is fundamentally fixed. Now, not perfectly fixed, but have fundamentally fixed the Safety Act. For somebody now to come in and say that he would demand a moratorium, understanding that 100 of us state's attorneys already did, and there was a lawsuit in which the Supreme Court eventually found the Pretrial Fairness Act to be constitutional, is just not valid or doesn't make sense in terms of what has happened over the last 3 years.
Right.
This is the law. The only thing that we can do at this point is advocate to continue to have fixes where we see that there's problematic language.
Now, the reason why that was a stickler was because that would have made a lot of news if J.B. Pritzker put a moratorium on any part of the Safety Act. Would have been national news.
Absolutely.
That would have been too large to to go under any radar and be escaped. But you also mentioned discretion. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that we talked about in the Safety Act, when he was talking about some of the things that he didn't like about it, was, people are getting arrested, but they're just walking free. Mm-hmm. But I tried to bring up that in each case, a judge has discretion. The Safety Act did not take away the power of a judge to apply the law. It never did, right?
It did, actually.
Okay.
In some cases.
Okay.
So when we talk about the Safety Act, it's important to know that the Safety Act was 764 pages that involved a lot of stuff, only which a portion of it was the Pretrial Fairness Act, which deals with what we're talking about.
Okay.
And so the Pretrial Fairness Act, the way that it was created, and this is what we objected to, is that they created a detention net of offenses, which means you have to be charged with a certain offense to give me the ability to petition to detain you.
Understood.
So if you're not charged with something like that, there's nothing I can do, and there's nothing a judge can do.
Okay.
Now, if it's a detainable offense, it's my discretion to ask to detain or not. And if I do ask to detain, it's up to the judge whether or not to detain. And so that's where we do have judicial discretion. But, for example, there are certain offenses that just cannot be detainable because of the way the law was drafted.
Okay. All right.
And that's what I'm trying to fix still with the legislators.
Right. And that's important, that legalese. Mm-hmm. The average person doesn't know that. Most people don't or aren't aware of that. So that's something people need to pay attention to. Now, the collaborative diversion and the pretrial arrests are just a couple of the programs that you enacted under your leadership. Let's do a little SWOT analysis with them. Time is 9:14. What's going good, and what can we tweak and peak to make a little better? What do you think?
Well, so I want to talk about kind of the diversity of the programs that we have. Everybody comes into our system, and they have a different level of need and risk, low, medium, and high risk. And so what we have done is we've created a program for every single person. And I want people to understand risk doesn't necessarily mean violence. Risk means risk to reoffend. And that's what we're trying to figure out. For 25 years, the Kane County State's Attorney's Office has had deferred prosecution programs. And that means a person is arrested, they're brought through our normal court system, and then they are given the opportunity to be held accountable, but without having a conviction on their record at the end if they do everything that we ask them to do. And most of that is usually treatment, housing, things of that nature, like trying to get them help to get them out of the system. Now, statistically, and I have a 70-plus page end-of-the-year report that is always available, we have great success in those programs. Right. We have them for felonies, misdemeanors, domestic violence, first-time weapons offender, because they really help out. And those programs have been proven to be educationally I should say that Aurora University actually looked at one of ours, our domestic violence diversion one, to show that we have a low recidivism rate. And recidivism means you're committing another crime. Right. And to have an outside entity review a program to show that it's working means it's working. Right. So that's for our low-level, low-risk individuals. We had nothing for our moderate risk, moderate need individuals, and that's where the pre-arrest diversion comes into place. Okay. And that's the one that partners with law enforcement because we know that there's more need, but we've already probably put them through the system and it didn't work. And so this helps them with that harm reduction approach. And for the viewers who've seen me on the show with you before, it's where we help them with what they need. Right. If they're chronically trespassing because they're homeless and they're out in front of a business, we're going to help them find a place to be so that it's not affecting the business, but it's also protecting them from having more law enforcement interaction. Right. So then we have our high-risk, high-need individuals, and so we have had 3 specialty courts. So we have drug rehabilitative court, mental health court, and veterans court. We just created, under my administration, it wasn't just me, it was all of the judicial partners, our 4th specialty court, which was DUI rehabilitative court. Right. And these are all been highly successful in terms of helping people with what they need and getting them resources. And so I'm very proud of all of that for Kane County because we really look to see what you need to help you get out of the system and not just try to say, don't do it again, because that's never effective.
Right, because that's the old way of doing things.
Yes.
Which I think with all of the issues inherent in the Safety Act, which are still under review and being changed,
Yes.
working with the Sheriffs and the Chiefs Association. The alternative would have been a negative.
Right.
Okay.
And that's the thing. For people who look at this, we're going to have people who fail. It's inevitable because people are flawed.
Right.
And when you have a substance use issue, it's probably because of an underlying trauma. And if you don't get to that underlying trauma, you're never going to help with the substance use issue. But we know people suffer traumas throughout their life. Sometimes people get set back. I mean, think about what happened when COVID, when everyone was stuck in their homes. We saw a rise of drug and other substance use. We saw a rise in domestic violence, in child abuse and neglect cases. That was a horrible time for everybody when you were just stuck in here, the mental health issues that were caused as a result of that. So if you don't recognize that and try to treat that as more of a medical issue, you're really going to fail in a criminal justice system. We're just housing people then.
Right, right. The time is 9:18 a.m. Good morning. If you're just now joining us, Renee Colin, good morning to you. Jen Mendoza, good morning. Happy Monday to you. And Vanessa Ann Calderon, who always has a positive message for us. She says, good morning, my beautiful city of lights. Aurora, have a blessed week. Stay safe and take care of yourself and each other. I like that. Where have we heard that before? Anthony Garcia, Tracy Duran, and Daniel Calderon, good morning. All right, so next thing. Where do you, should you win re-election?
Mm-hmm.
What are your priorities?
So my biggest priority is to continue to expand what we've already done in terms of looking at the needs of the individuals, but I really want to do a shift of that towards juveniles.
Okay.
We have seen a rise in juvenile cases, and so the problem is if you cannot get to the kids, then they become adults in the system. And we see a lot of kids who maybe grow up with one parent, grow up in an area that's not safe, grow up where gangs are trying to get them to be a part of it. And I know in most of our communities, we do have programming where it's trying to keep the kids out of that. But they may go into the system. And so what I want to do is figure out a way to better help them without putting them through the system. We see so many kids in our juvenile justice center right now who are in for domestic violence. And what we have found is that most of the kids who are committing domestic violence aren't doing it because of the power and control that we see in adults. Mm. They're doing it because they have family chaos. Something is going on in their family. Maybe one parent is abusing another one, and now the kid is stepping up to defend them. Sometimes we just see one-off offenses because, you know what, kids are kids, and sometimes they may punch their sibling.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they should go into our system. But what we want to do is try to provide stability through the same grant-funded programming that we're doing for adults in our system, but really get to the kids, which would also then benefit the families. And that's going to be our next big push. You know, we had our Juvenile Justice Summit where we're really trying to explain what our juvenile justice program is, bring the people to the table who know what we're talking about and how we can actually expand these services. So I'm so excited about the possibilities of what we can do with this.
I think that's great because it's through that I first heard about ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experience, whatever the S stands for. Syndrome, yeah. So it is important. It is important. Quick question, quick answer. Is crime on the rise in Kane County?
No. We have pockets where we see crime trends, but overall we're seeing crime going down. Okay. And so I think that we see, for example, domestic violence. That's always one that is fluctuating, especially during summer when it's warm and people are out. And we're going to see that during Thanksgiving and Christmas when families get together again. So we see little crime trends going, but overall, I don't think crime is on the rise.
Yeah, and I brought up in the interview that I had with Mr. Sosnowski too that I've been attending become a part of Project Safe Aurora, which is underneath the Kane County Health Department. There's an APD officer who liaisons with the, and he, just like you said, domestic violence is always a fluctuating, and it's on Sundays and warm time, and also things like bar fights.
Right.
You know, fist fight late at night kind of thing, but gun violence, crime, assaults, and homicides and things like that were low, zero digits in many cases. Anyway, 9:22 is the time. Claudia Lopez, good morning. So it's Monday, the day before the election. Nervous?
Yes, I'm always nervous. I mean, until the numbers come out and the victory is there, I'm going to keep working as if I'm losing. But I'm out there. I believe in positivity. I know I'm the right person to continue because the last 4 years, the programming that we've put in has only proven to make our community safe.
Right. Is there, and I am interested in what goes into making these decisions. I'm interested in the consensus building with sheriffs and chiefs. I've never worn the badge before, so on the outside looking in, it's interesting. What's the magic wand? What's the magic wand thing that, if you could, what's the magic wand situation to make an equitable, fair, and completely safe and effective Safety Act, which would make everybody happy? We can't make everybody happy,
Right.
but if we could.
So for the Safety Act or the community in general?
Both,
Okay.
yeah.
So starting with the Safety Act, we have to get rid of this idea of detainable offenses. Every offense should be potentially detainable. The burden would be on me to prove that the person is either a danger or a willful flight, or that no condition or combination of conditions can keep the community safe.
Okay.
And so that is what we need to do. And this is what we've advocated for, because the system that we have now is very similar to what New York has. And after they put their system in place, crime increased. We've been advocating for what New Jersey has, which has no detainable list. It's just anything. And crime actually decreased when you did that. And it just makes sense to do that. And so I'll talk about the community thing, but then I want to talk about that Elgin case as to why this matters.
Okay.
For the community, we need resources for everybody. When you have a more affluent community and you have access to resources, you don't see as much criminal activity. Not that there isn't criminal activities, there's no arrest for it because people are deflected or deferred more to treatment.
Right.
When you don't have resources in less affluent communities, then the only answer is an arrest and put them through the system where then we get them support. We need to make sure that we have equal resources throughout our entire community, no matter what the wealth population is.
I agree. I totally agree with that. You mentioned the Elgin case.
Yes. So I know my opponent talked about this, and the problem is he is not saying what actually happened. Mm-hmm. So ethically, I cannot talk about the facts of these cases because I'm prosecuting it, and we have ethical guidelines of what we can and cannot talk about. I will talk about the procedure. So this is a kid who was 21 years old who did commit a domestic violence offense with a family member. However, to ask to detain him, we would have to prove that there's no condition or combination of conditions that would have kept the victim safe. And there was one, which is he couldn't go back to the house and he couldn't have contact with that individual.
Okay.
So that person could not be detained because of that reason. But there were conditions that were put on that individual, including not having that contact or going back to that home, which was followed, and also to have to come back to court. When the defendant was supposed to come back to court, he failed to appear. A warrant was issued for his arrest, and he was arrested and brought back to our first appearance court. He was given another court date, and he was released. When he left the jail, he did walk down through St. Charles by a school, and he punched a kid. He fled at that time period. Now, the highest possible charge we had for that case was an aggravated battery on a public place. That's a Class 3 felony. He was arrested by the great work of the St. Charles Police Department, and he was brought right back to first appearance court. Aggravated battery is a non-detainable offense, which means I can't petition to hold him. A judge couldn't even say, I'm going to hold him, because then we would be violating the law.
Right.
There's no higher charge that I could have possibly done to have this individual detained. So when my opponent says I have great discretion in what I do, he's essentially saying I should have unethically charged something there was no law for. And I will not do that because I'm an ethical prosecutor. So he was released again with more conditions. Don't go near that kid. Don't go near that school. Stay away. We filed a petition to revoke his pretrial release in the domestic violence case, which we can, based on his new arrest. And that was set over for October 3rd. We noticed it improperly. He didn't show up. The judge, over our objection, gave a continuance to another date, and then it's in the meantime that murder in Elgin happened.
Okay, so between the continuance date and what the next date would have been.
Correct. And had he come to court on October 3rd, we would have asked for him to be detained. He would have likely been detained because we saw the escalation in what he was doing, which is why we followed the law exactly as it is. And so this is a flaw in the Pretrial Fairness Act because When we saw that he was escalating his behavior, we should have been able to ask to detain him, but we couldn't. So we did everything that we possibly could in that situation.
Okay. Also, so it started with a domestic okay. Now, I know that you've done a lot of work with domestic violence and survivors and things like that, strengthening the law. The time is 9:27. With a little bit of time we got, how is that going?
So I think very well, but there's more we could do.
Okay.
If you ever kind of look at the people who are in our system who commit crimes, a lot of them came up in households that did have domestic violence. Like either they witnessed domestic violence or they were the victim of it. And so when we, as I said before, where I really want to get involved with the juveniles, that's where we can really break the cycle of domestic violence.
Oh, yeah.
And so what I've been proposing to do is to change our court system. So instead of having domestic violence go to multiple different courtrooms, it's going to go to 3 specialized courtrooms where the prosecutors, the public defender, and the judge are all well versed in domestic violence law, and we really try to get to the root of the issue because it's a learned behavior. I've often said before that I know that I am prosecuting the former victims in my cases. Like if I see a kid and a kid is a victim, I'm likely to have to prosecute them later on because they've learned that that's how you behave in a relationship. And if you don't recognize that, then you're never going to be successful. If we can specialize this, we'll get people out of the system quicker by getting them actual resources to break that cycle, plus we can help with the family members to make sure that the kids get treatment. It's something I'm trying to partner with the health department to do, Mutual Ground that's here in Aurora, Crisis Center that's in Elgin, because we all know that once you break that cycle, you're never going to see them again for this.
Right. That reminds me, you mentioned an acronym for our team that works with APD here, and it's the CRT.
The CRT, thank you.
CRT is the name of our team with investigator David Guevara.
Great guy.
Who is a great guy. He's been on the show a bunch of times. Woodlawn Bullies, good morning to you. Norma Peterson, good morning to you as well. Good morning, Gams fan. Right back at you, Aisha Saxon. Last question. What is your message to the people of Kane County?
My message to the people of Kane County is over the last 4 years, I've done exactly what I promised to do when I ran the first time, which is to take a look at every case individually and do what's right for that case. If you just look at what a person is charged with and you just give them that as a sentence, then you are dooming that person to do it all over again. I have put my name out there for different people who have worked really hard in our jail, for example, getting the treatment, being mentors to other people, learning what was right and wrong, to put them back on the streets just to find out that now they're productive members of our community. It costs $52,000 just to house an inmate, when if you look at that person and you get them the treatment and the resources, you can actually get them to be better for our community and they come back and help people. That $52,000 is well spent for the people who are violent in our community, and those are the people I want to send over. So I'm asking everyone to vote for me for re-election because my 4 years has proven that I will do what's right for this community, that we have kept our community as safe as possible. I have been a vocal opponent when there are laws that are not good for Kane County, and I've actually helped to write the laws that have fixed everything. And so with all of that being said, I believe that I know that I am the best candidate to continue to be their Kane County State's Attorney. So get out and vote for continued safety.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. This has been State's Attorney, Kane County State's Attorney Jamie Mosser here on the program. I hope that you guys have a great and fantastic rest of the day. Don't forget to get out there and vote. Make sure that your voice is heard. Exercise that right to vote. Good morning, Aurora. We'll return tomorrow with more news, more weather, and the very best of Aurora. Actually, I take that back. We won't return tomorrow. We will return on Wednesday. Tomorrow we have a very, very important community discussion taking place with our dear friends of the Dunham Foundation. And it's going to be formative for Kane County, but we'll get there. Take care of yourself and each other.
Count Being a local business in Chicago, we've always worked with community banks, but over time, those smaller banks started getting acquired by larger national footprint banks. It became time to work with Wintrust to meet our needs without having to have that big bank feel.
Wintrust understood what they wanted to accomplish, and they've increased in size 5 times over.
As we continue to grow, we're going to keep needing to borrow, so I'm sure they're going to love that.
Serving their needs. It's really the foundation of what Wintrust Commercial Banking is all about.